The blue painter's tape slashed across the front door was the first thing that hit me. A violent stripe against the fading yellow siding my mother had loved. Then I saw Mark. He was sitting in his idling sedan at the curb, watching me with the patience of a man who held all the cards. He rolled down the window, his expression flat and unbothered. "Get out, Sarah," he said, as if ordering a coffee. I sold the house. The exhaust from the idling sedan hung in the humid afternoon air. Turning the sunlight hazy and gray, I pulled my beat-up compact into the driveway, the brakes squealing a tired protest that matched the ache in my lower back. It had been a 10-hour shift at the warehouse, lifting crates that felt heavier with every passing hour. And all I wanted was to step inside my mother's house, shower the warehouse grit off my skin, and pretend for just 1 hour that the world had stopped spinning. But the world had not stopped. It had tilted. The first thing I saw was the blue painter's tape. It was slashed across the front door in a violent, jagged X, holding a piece of white printer paper against the fading yellow siding. It looked industrial. It looked official. It looked like a wound. Then I saw Mark. My stepfather was sitting in his silver luxury sedan parked right at the curb, the engine running, the air conditioning surely blasting. He was watching me. He did not look like a grieving widower. He looked like a man checking a watch, waiting for a delayed train. He wore sunglasses that hid his eyes, but I could see the set of his jaw. It was tight, smug. I put my car in park, but didn't kill the engine. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The last 3 months since Mom died had been a blur of funeral arrangements, casserole dishes, and this strange, suspended silence where Mark and I circled each other like polite strangers. I had moved back in to help sort the estate, to keep the lights on, to stop the house from dying along with her. Mark had been living at his condo across town, claiming he couldn't bear the memories. Apparently, he had gotten over it. I stepped out of my car, the gravel crunching loudly under my work boots. Mark lowered his window as I approached. The blast of cold air from inside his car hit my sweaty face, smelling of new leather and mints. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. "Get out. Sarah," he said. The voice was flat, devoid of any friction. I sold the house. I stopped walking. The words did not make sense. They were English words, simple and direct, but they refused to assemble into a coherent reality. "What?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, snatched away by the wind. "I sold it," Mark repeated. He took off his sunglasses then, folding them deliberately and placing them on the dashboard. He looked at me with a pity that felt rehearsed. "I know this is hard for you to hear, but the market is hot, and I got a cash offer, a flipper. They want to close fast." I looked from him to the house. This was the house where I had learned to walk, the house where Mom had nursed me through chickenpox, where we had hidden from thunderstorms under forts made of blankets. It was not just wood and drywall. It was the physical vessel of my history. "You can't just sell it," I said, the nausea rising in my throat. "Mark, we haven't even finished probate. We haven't even gone through her closet." Mark sighed, a long, suffering exhalation through his nose. He picked at a piece of lint on his trousers. "Sarah, listen to me. Your mother left everything to me. We were married. That is how the law works. I am the sole owner. And frankly, having you squatting there is a liability for the buyer." "Squatting?" I felt the blood rush to my face. "I am not squatting. I am maintaining the property. I am paying the electric bill. I am taking care of her things because you wouldn't do it." He waved a hand, dismissing my labor, my grief, my existence. "It is done. The contract is signed. The buyers want the property vacant. Immediately." He reached into the passenger seat and picked up a clipboard. He held it up, but he didn't hand it to me. He kept it angled away, just out of reach. "I have the eviction notice right here," he said, tapping the paper. "Since you are family, I am being generous. I am giving you 7 days. Legally, I could have the sheriff here tomorrow." I reached for the clipboard. "Let me see that." He pulled it back. Sharp and quick. The movement was instinctive, defensive. You don't need to handle it, he said. It is standard language. Notice to vacate. Termination of tenancy at will. It is all there. I stepped closer, my hands shaking. Mark, show me the paperwork. If you sold the house, show me the sale contract. Show me the deed transfer. Show me where Mom signed everything over to you specifically. For a second, just a split second. His composure cracked. His eyes darted to the house, then back to me. He tilted the clipboard again, flashing a page dense with legal text. I saw a seal. I saw bold lettering that said, Notice. I saw a signature that looked like his. I am the executor. Sarah, he said, his voice hardening. I don't answer to you. I'm trying to keep this clean. I am trying to keep you from getting embarrassed. If you make a scene, if you drag this out, the new owners will sue you for damages. Do you have $5,000 for a lawyer? Do you have money to pay their holding costs? He knew I didn't. He knew I was barely scraping by. That the funeral costs had eaten my savings. That I was working overtime just to keep the utilities on in a house he claimed to own. I stared at the paper he was guarding like a hand of poker cards. It looked official. The letterhead looked real. But why wouldn't he let me hold it? 7 days, Mark said. He started to roll the window up. Leave the appliances. Leave the curtains. Just take your clothes and whatever junk is yours. The rest is part of the estate. The window sealed shut with a soft thud. He didn't look at me again. He put the car in gear and pulled away, the tires kicking up dust that settled over my boots. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty street. The silence of the neighborhood felt heavy, judgmental. I walked up the driveway, my legs feeling like they were moving through water. I reached the front door and ripped the tape off. The sound of it tearing was loud, aggressive. Inside, the house was cool and dark. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, closing my eyes, waiting for the panic to subside. But as I opened my eyes and looked into the living room, the panic didn't leave. It shifted. Something was wrong. It wasn't obvious. To a stranger, the room would have looked normal. The beige sofa was where it always was. The television was off. The curtains were drawn. But I knew this room. I knew the exact angle of the throw pillows. I knew the specific clutter of the coffee table. The silver-framed photo of Mom and me at the Grand Canyon was gone. I walked over to the mantel. The dust outline was there, a perfect rectangle in the layer of gray that had accumulated over the last week. I touched the wood. It was clean. I moved to the hallway. The wall where Mom hung her collection of antique keys was different. 2 of the keys were missing. Not the valuable ones. Just 2 random iron keys. My heart began to race again. Faster this time. I ran to the small study at the back of the house. This was where Mom had kept her life organized. She had a metal file box, a heavy fireproof thing she kept under the desk. I dropped to my knees. The box was there. But it was turned. Mom always kept the handle facing out, ready to be grabbed. Now the hinge was facing out. I pulled it out and tried the latch. Locked. I fumbled for the spare key I kept on my ring, my fingers trembling so bad I dropped them twice. Finally, I got the key in and twisted. The lid popped open. It wasn't empty, but it was shuffled. Mom was meticulous. She filed alphabetically, obsessively, automobile, bank, credit, insurance, now. The folders were jammed in without order. The insurance folder was in the front. The deed folder, where she kept the original purchase papers from 30 years ago, was gone. Mark had been here. He hadn't just been here. He had tossed the place. He had come in while I was at work, used his key, the key I thought he had lost, and curated the house. He wasn't just selling the house. He was erasing the evidence of who lived here. I sat back on my heels, the cold floor seeping through my jeans. Why take the photo? Why take the specific files? If he owned everything, if he was the sole heir, why steal it? You don't steal what is already yours. I needed to know what was happening. I needed facts, not Mark's sneering threats. I pulled my phone out. It was 4:45 in the afternoon. The county offices closed at 5. I dialed the number for the county clerk and recorder. I had it saved because I had called 3 weeks ago to ask about probate procedures. A conversation that had ended with a helpful clerk telling me nothing had been filed yet. The phone rang and rang. County clerk, records division. A woman's voice answered. She sounded bored, thinking about the end of her shift. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to check the status of a property. I think a deed might have been recorded recently." "Address?" she asked. I gave her the address. 412 Oak Street. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. It seemed to take hours. I stared at the chaotic file box, my stomach twisting. "Okay," the clerk said. "I see a filing. Recorded." Wow. Yesterday afternoon. Yesterday? I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of filing? Is it a warranty deed? Did Mark Halstead transfer it? "No," she said, dragging the word out. "It is not a warranty deed. It is a— Hang on. This is weird. It is a quitclaim deed, from the estate to Mark Halstead, and then immediately a memorandum of contract with an LLC. Quitclaim? My mother was dead. She couldn't sign a quitclaim. Who signed it? It says Mark Halstead, as personal representative, but he's not the representative yet." I whispered. "There is no probate case." The clerk paused. "I can't give legal advice, ma'am. I just record what is dropped off. But I will say, the notary stamp is from a different county, and it was recorded at 4:59 yesterday, right at the wire. Can you send me a copy?" I asked. "You have to come in and pay the fee. We are closing in 10 minutes. I looked at the clock. I couldn't make it. "I will be there tomorrow morning." I said, "Thank you." I hung up. The silence in the room felt dangerous now. Mark had told me he sold the house, but the clerk saw a memorandum of contract, not a sale deed, and a quitclaim signed by him. To him? I needed to talk to someone who wasn't in my head. I dialed Elena. Elena had been my best friend since high school. She was a paralegal, though she worked in corporate law, not estate law, but she knew how to read the fine print of disaster. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up? He's kicking me out." "Elena," I said. I didn't mean to cry, but the words came out choked. "Mark was here. He says he sold the house. He gave me 7 days." "Whoa, slow down," Elena said. Her voice switched instantly to professional mode. "Who sold the house?" "Mark. He says Mom left it all to him. He showed me some eviction notice, but he wouldn't let me read it." "Did you sign anything?" Elena asked sharply. "No. Good. Do not sign anything. Ever. Sarah, listen to me. In this state, you have rights as a tenant. Even if you don't pay rent, he can't just tape a note to the door and tell you to leave in a week. That is illegal eviction. He said I'm a liability." I said, "He said the buyers will sue me. He is trying to scare you." Elena said, "That is a classic bully tactic. If he had a real court order, a sheriff would be serving it, not him in his fancy car." I told her about the file box, about the missing photo, about the call to the clerk and the quitclaim deed. Elena was quiet for a moment. "That sounds messy. Sarah, if he signed as personal representative, he needs letters testamentary from a judge. If probate hasn't opened, he forged his authority. What do I do?" I asked. "I feel like he's erasing me." "Document everything," Elena commanded. "I mean it. Take pictures of the house right now. Every room. Prove you live there. Prove the condition of the house. And write it all down. Make a timeline. When did your mom get sick? When did she die? When did Mark move out? Every conversation. If this goes to court, the person with the best notes wins." We hung up with a promise that she would look up the property records online from her office in the morning. I stood up. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my chest, but the fear was hardening into something else. Obsession. I went to the kitchen. Mark had taken the file box, or at least rummaged through it. He had taken the papers from the study, but Mark didn't know this house like I did. He didn't know Mom like I did. Mom was a woman who didn't trust computers and didn't trust men who smiled too much. Mark had been charming when they met. But toward the end, when the cancer got bad, I had seen the shadow pass over her eyes when he walked in the room. She had become secretive. I looked at the shelf above the refrigerator. It was jammed with cookbooks, old, grease-spattered binders, a falling-apart copy of The Joy of Cooking, and dozens of community spiral-bound recipe books. Mark never cooked. He wouldn't touch that shelf in a million years. I grabbed a step stool and climbed up. I pulled down the heavy stack of books. Dust motes danced in the fading light. I flipped through The Joy of Cooking. Nothing. I grabbed the red binder, the one where she kept her holiday recipes. I shook it. A manila envelope slid out from between the pages of the Christmas cookie section. My breath caught. It was labeled in Mom's shaky, late-stage handwriting, estate/keep safe. I climbed down and sat on the kitchen floor, my legs crossed. I opened the clasp. Inside were fragments. Not a whole picture, but pieces of a puzzle she was trying to leave me. First, a life insurance summary. It was dated 6 months ago. The beneficiary listed was not Mark Halstead. It was estate. Second, a mortgage statement. Mark had told me the house was underwater, that he had to sell it to pay off the debts. I looked at the statement. The principal balance was $40,000. The house was worth at least $400,000. There was no debt crisis. There was massive equity. And finally, a piece of notepad paper. It wasn't a will. It wasn't notarized. But it was her voice. I don't know how to tell Sarah about the loan Mark took. I need to fix this before I go. I need to protect Sarah. He is pushing me to sign the power of attorney. I am hiding this because I don't want him to be angry. I stared at the note. The ink was slightly smudged, as if she had been crying, or sweating, or just tired. He is pushing me. Mark hadn't just waited for her to die. He had been working on this while she was dying. My phone buzzed on the counter, making me jump. I scrambled up and looked at the screen. It was a text from Mark. Moving out checklist. 1. Leave all keys on the counter. Garage openers too. 2. Do not remove any appliances, including the washer/dryer. 3. Broom clean condition. 4. Do not contact the realtor or the buyer. All comms go through me. If you interfere with the sale, I will dock the cost from any inheritance you might get. I read the list twice. Do not contact the realtor. If everything was above board, why would he care if I talked to the realtor? If the house was legally his? My presence was just a nuisance, not a threat. He was afraid. He wanted the keys because he wanted to control access. He wanted me silent because I was the only one who knew the truth about the timeline. I looked around the kitchen. The shadows were long now, stretching across the linoleum. The house felt vulnerable. I felt vulnerable, but I also felt something else. I looked at the handwritten note again. I need to protect Sarah. She couldn't protect me anymore. She was gone, but she had left me the ammunition to protect myself. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't start packing boxes. I went to the living room and dragged the heavy armchair in front of the front door, wedging it under the handle. It was a primitive lock, but it made me feel slightly better. I lay down on the couch, fully dressed, clutching the manila envelope to my chest like a shield. I kept my phone in my hand. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I replayed the conversation at the car window. I replayed the way he angled the clipboard. I replayed the clerk's voice saying, "Quitclaim." Mark thought I was just the grieving stepdaughter. He thought I was weak. He thought I was broken by the loss of my mother. And I was broken. I was shattered. But broken things have sharp edges. I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't going to let him cash out my mother's legacy for a quick payday. I was going to find out what happened in those final months. I was going to find out who this buyer really was. My next step wouldn't be emotional. I wasn't going to beg him. I wasn't going to scream at him. I was going to audit him. I watched the streetlights flicker on through the gap in the curtains, casting stripes of orange light across the room. I waited for morning. I had a date with the county recorder. The sun came up slowly, a reluctant gray dawn that offered no warmth. I hadn't slept. Not really. I had drifted in and out of a shallow doze, waking up every time the house settled or a car drove by. At 7 o'clock, I made coffee. I drank it black, standing at the kitchen window, watching the street. Mark didn't show up. No sheriff arrived. Just the mail carrier and a neighbor walking a dog. I showered quickly, scrubbing the warehouse grime and the stress sweat off my skin. I dressed in the most professional clothes I had, a pair of black slacks from an old catering job and a white button-down that I ironed until the steam burned my fingers. I needed to look like someone who belonged in a government office. I needed to look like I couldn't be dismissed. I took the manila envelope from the cookbooks and put it in my backpack. I added a notebook, 3 pens, and a portable charger. I took photos of every room. Just like Elena said, I photographed the empty space on the mantel. I photographed the lock on the file box. I photographed the tape residue on the front door. Then I drove to the county building. The recorder's office was in the basement of the courthouse, a room that smelled of toner and old paper. There were rows of computers and a long counter behind glass. I took a ticket and waited. Number 42. When my number was called, I walked up to the window. The clerk was different from the woman on the phone, a younger guy with glasses. I need copies of all recorded documents for 412 Oak Street. I said, everything from the last 12 months. He typed it in. That will be $2 a page. I don't care. I said, print it all. He hit a button, and a machine behind him whirred to life. I watched the pages slide out. There were only a few. He stapled them and slid them under the glass. I took them to a small wooden table in the corner and spread them out. The first document was the quitclaim deed. Grantor, Mark Halstead, personal representative of the estate of Mary Reed. Grantee, Mark Halstead, an individual. I stared at it. He had transferred the house from the estate to himself for $10 and other good and valuable consideration. I looked at the signature date. It was dated 2 days ago. I looked at the notary acknowledgement. State of Nevada. County of Clark. Nevada? My mother had never lived in Nevada. Mark lived here, in town. Why was this notarized in Las Vegas? I pulled out my phone and searched the notary's name. Jennifer S. Miller. She came up immediately, a mobile notary service in Las Vegas. I looked closer at the document. The signature for Mark looked precise. Too precise, like it had been signed slowly. The second document was the Memorandum of Contract. Seller, Mark Halstead. Buyer, Obsidian Holdings, LLC. Obsidian Holdings. It sounded ominous. Fake. I searched the Secretary of State database on my phone. Obsidian Holdings, LLC. Formation date, 14 days ago. Registered agent. A corporate service company. Manager. Confidential. The buyer didn't exist 2 weeks ago. Mark had formed a shell company, or found someone who did, just to buy this house. And the eviction notice he showed me? It wasn't in the public record. There was no court case. It was a prop. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. This wasn't just a greedy stepfather selling a house too fast. This was fraud. He was transferring assets to himself using questionable authority, then flipping them to a shell company to wash the title. He was trying to steal the equity before I could open probate. I gathered the papers. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, harsh morning light. I wasn't going to work today. I called my supervisor and told him I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. I got in my car and looked at the pile of documents on the passenger seat. Mark wanted a war? He wanted to play legal games? Fine. I put the car in drive. I wasn't going home. I was going to find a lawyer. And not just any lawyer. I was going to find the meanest, sharpest estate shark in the city. Mark Halstead had made a mistake. He thought he had sold a house. He had actually just bought himself a nightmare. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a strip mall, the engine idling, the air conditioning struggling against the midday heat. My phone felt heavy in my hand. Like a grenade I was afraid to pull the pin on. I had the documents from the county recorder on the passenger seat, the quitclaim deed and the memorandum of contract. But I needed the source. I needed the lie Mark was telling the world. I typed the text message slowly, forcing my fingers to be precise. Mark, I am consulting with counsel regarding the estate. Please forward the full executed purchase and sale agreement and the court order granting you eviction authority immediately. I need these in PDF format for review. I hit send. The response came 3 minutes later. It wasn't a PDF. It was a barrage of images. Mark had taken photos of a computer screen with his phone. The angles were skewed. The lighting was full of glare, and the text was barely legible. It was a deliberate act of incompetence. He was mocking me. I zoomed in on the first image. It was the top half of a standard real estate contract. I could see the words, Residential Purchase Agreement. But the section for the purchase price was cut off. The section for the buyer's name was blurry. Though I could make out the shape of Obsidian Holdings, LLC, I swiped to the next image. It was a text message screenshot, presumably from him to me, though I didn't remember receiving it. It said, "Tenancy terminated effective immediately." There was no court stamp, no judge's signature, no case number. I typed back, "These are illegible. Please email the full PDF files, and I need the court case number for the eviction order. A text message is not a legal eviction." Mark's reply popped up instantly. "Stop playing lawyer. Sarah, you are out of your depth. I am doing you a favor by keeping the courts out of it. If I file formally, you will have an eviction on your record for 7 years. You will never rent an apartment again. Just take the hint." He wasn't going to send them. He couldn't send them, because the eviction order didn't exist. He was bluffing with a pair of twos, betting everything on the fact that I was too scared or too broke to call him on it. I looked at the strip mall storefronts. A dry cleaner, a vape shop, and a small office with gold lettering on the glass. Holloway Associates, Estate Planning and Probate. My coworker, Dave, had recommended Mr. Holloway. "He is expensive," Dave had said, "but he is a bulldog." I didn't have money for a bulldog. I barely had money for a chihuahua. But I had a credit card with a $2,000 limit that I had been saving for an emergency. This was an emergency. I grabbed the folder of documents from the seat and walked in. The waiting room smelled of stale coffee and old carpet. The receptionist looked at me over reading glasses. "I don't have an appointment," I said, "but I have a potential fraud case involving a probate estate and an imminent sale. I need 20 minutes. I can pay the consultation fee up front." She hesitated, looking at my frantic eyes and the death grip I had on the manila folder. "Let me see if he is free," she said. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across a mahogany desk from Elias Holloway. He was an older man, wearing a suit that looked like it had been stylish in 1995. He had tired eyes, but they were sharp. "Tell me what is happening," he said, fast. I laid it out. The death, the lack of probate, the sudden appearance of Mark with the eviction notice, the quitclaim deed signed by Mark as personal representative before a case was even opened, the Nevada notary. Holloway listened without interrupting. He leaned back in his chair, tenting his fingers. "Let me see the deed," he said. I handed him the copy I had paid for that morning. He put on his glasses and studied it. He hummed, a low, dissatisfied sound. "He can't do this," Holloway said quietly. "He says he sold it." I said, "He says the closing is happening any day now." Holloway shook his head. "Sarah, listen to me. In this state, when someone dies, their assets are frozen in a way. Even if there is a will leaving everything to Mark, the will has to be admitted to probate. The court has to validate it. The court has to issue what we call letters testamentary. That is the golden ticket. That is what gives someone the legal authority to sign a deed for a dead person." He tapped the paper. "He signed this as personal representative, but if you check the docket and there is no case, then he is not the personal representative. He is just a guy with a pen." "Is it forgery?" I asked. "It is worse," Holloway said. "It is fraud against the title record. He is creating a cloud on the title. He is betting that the title company won't look too closely, or that he can bully you out before anyone notices." He looked at the notary stamp again. "And this is sloppy. Nevada? Was your mother in Nevada when she died?" "No. She died in the hospice center 3 miles from here." "Then why is he using a Las Vegas notary to acknowledge a signature that supposedly happened here?" Holloway asked. "I will tell you why. because he couldn't find a notary here who would stamp a document for a personal representative without seeing the court paperwork. He found an online notary, or a friend, or someone who didn't ask questions. He sat forward. "This is a mess, Sarah. But it is a mess we can use. Can I stop the sale?" I asked. "We can try," he said, "but the law moves slow, and real estate moves fast. If a bona fide buyer purchases the home and records a deed before we get a judge to stop it, unwinding that transaction is a nightmare. You need to be a wrench in the gears." He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and started writing. "Here is what you are going to do, right now, today." I pulled out my notebook, ready to transcribe his commandments. 1, Holloway said, "Do not leave that house. Possession is your strongest asset. If you leave, you surrender your position. If he changes the locks, you break back in. It is your residence. He cannot kick you out without a sheriff, and he cannot get a sheriff without a judge, and he cannot get a judge without a valid deed." 2, he continued, "Gather proof, not just documents. I want proof of life. Utility bills in your name, mail addressed to you at the house, evidence that you are a tenant, family or not." 3, he said, looking me dead in the eye, "We need to put the title company on notice. Do you know who is handling the escrow?" I shook my head. "Mark is hiding it. He won't tell me. Find out." Holloway said, "Trick him. Stalk him. Find the realtor. Once we know the title company, I will draft a lis pendens, a notice of pending legal action, and we will threaten to file it. No title company in the world will insure a property with an active dispute. They are allergic to risk." He paused. "But I have to warn you, Sarah, this is going to get ugly. Mark is evidently willing to lie on government documents. When you corner a man like that, he doesn't apologize, he attacks." "He already is," I said. "He told me I'm unstable." Holloway nodded grimly. "That is the playbook. Discredit the witness. He will tell everyone you are crazy, greedy, or on drugs. You have to be bulletproof. No emotional texts, no screaming matches. You are a statue. You are a calm, boring wall of evidence." I paid him the consultation fee, $300, and walked out. I didn't feel safe, exactly, but I felt armed. I drove back to the house. The anxiety that had been buzzing in my veins was settling into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a litigant. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Mark's car again. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to see him. I wasn't ready to be a statue yet. I parked on the street, 2 houses down, and walked up quietly. I entered through the back gate, into the garden my mother had loved, and Mark had neglected. The weeds were knee-high. I unlocked the back door softly. I could hear Mark's voice booming from the living room. He was on the phone. I stood in the laundry room. The door cracked open just an inch. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Yeah, I know," Mark was saying. His voice was smooth, confident, the voice of a salesman. "Look, I appreciate the offer, but the closing date is firm. I have the movers lined up for Saturday." He paused, listening. "No, don't worry about her," he said, his tone shifting to something conspiratorial. "It's a sad situation. Honestly, Sarah has always been difficult since Mary died. She has sort of lost her grip. She thinks she has some claim to the house, but she's not on the deed. She's just confused, unstable." My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles turned white. Unstable. He was painting me as a hysteric to the very people who might listen to me. "I am handling it," Mark said. "I offered her some money to help her get settled elsewhere. She will be gone by the closing. Trust me. The house will be vacant. Just make sure the wire is ready." He laughed then, a short, ugly sound. "Yeah, okay. Talk soon." I heard his footsteps moving toward the kitchen. I slipped out the back door, closing it silently, and sprinted to the side of the house, crouching behind the overgrown azaleas. I waited until I heard the front door open and close, then the sound of his engine starting. I stayed in the bushes for a full minute after he drove away, unstable. I went back inside. The air in the house felt violated. He had been walking around in here. talking about me, erasing me. I went to my mother's bedroom. I needed to check something. Holloway had told me to gather proof, but I also needed to know what else Mark was liquidating. I opened the top drawer of her dresser. This was where she kept the jewelry box, a velvet-lined case that had belonged to her grandmother. It was there, but when I lifted it, it felt wrong, too light. I opened the lid. My breath hitched. The compartments were ravaged. The garnet ring she wore every day? Gone. The pearl necklace my father had given her for their 10th anniversary? Gone. The heavy gold bracelet she had promised to me specifically, explicitly, on her deathbed? Gone. All that was left were a few pairs of costume earrings and a broken watch. I sank onto the edge of the bed. This wasn't just selling the house to pay debts. This was looting. He was stripping the estate of anything portable and valuable before probate could even start. If I asked him about it, he would say she lost them, or that he sold them to pay for her medical bills. He was stealing our history. I took a picture of the empty box. Evidence. I told myself, this is just evidence. I stood up. I needed to find the title company. Mark hadn't mentioned the name on the phone, but he had mentioned a closing date. Saturday. That was 5 days away. I needed the realtor. I went to the living room and started digging through the recycling bin Mark had ignored. Nothing. I went to the kitchen. I looked at the corkboard where Mom used to pin business cards. Nothing. Then I remembered the neighbor, Mrs. Gable, 3 doors down. She was the neighborhood watch captain, a woman who knew everything and photographed anything suspicious. I walked over to her house. She answered the door in her gardening apron, looking surprised. "Sarah," she said, "I haven't seen you in weeks. I thought you moved out." "Not yet." "Mrs. Gable," I said, "actually, I have a weird question. Did you happen to see who put up the for sale sign in our yard? Mark took it down so fast I didn't get the name." Mrs. Gable beamed. "She lived for this." "Oh, honey, I didn't just see it. I took a picture of it to send to my sister. She's looking for a ranch-style house. Can I see it?" I asked. She retrieved her iPad and scrolled through her gallery. "Here." I looked at the screen. The sign was blue and silver. Prestige Realty. The agent's face was plastered on the bottom rider. "Call Brent Tucker." I took a picture of her screen with my phone. "Thank you." "Mrs. Gable, you are a lifesaver." She leaned in. "Is everything okay?" "Sarah? That Mark? He's been rushing around like his hair is on fire. Everything is fine." I lied, just tying up loose ends. I walked back to my car. Sitting in the driver's seat to make the call, I needed to be careful. If I spooked the agent, they might clam up. I dialed the number for Prestige Realty. "Prestige Realty. This is Julie," a chirpy voice answered. "Hi," I said, adopting my most bored, administrative voice. "This is Sarah from the transaction coordinator's office. I'm calling about the Halstead file." "Mark Halstead, 412 Oak Street." "Oh, sure," Julie said. "What do you need?" "I just need to confirm the title company for the closing file." I said, "We have a document that needs to go over, and the email got bounced back. Is it Stewart Title?" I threw out a guess, hoping she would correct me. "No, honey, it's First American," Julie said. "The escrow officer is Linda Vance." First American. Linda Vance, and we are still on track for Friday the 24th. "Right?" I asked, holding my breath. "Yes. Friday at 10 a.m. Julie confirmed. "Although, are we waiting on the final walkthrough? Brent hasn't sent the sign-off yet. I think Mark is handling that today." I said, "Thanks, Julie. You're the best." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I had them. First American Title, Friday the 24th, 10 in the morning. I had a target. My phone chimed. It was an email from Mark. Subject: Relocation Assistance. I opened it. "Sarah, I know things are tense. I want to help you move on. Since the house is sold and the new owners are taking possession this weekend, I am willing to offer you a cash for keys arrangement. I will give you $5,000 cash on Friday. All you have to do is be out of the house by Thursday night, leave the keys on the counter, and sign a short document confirming you have no further claims against the estate. This is a lot of money. Take it and get a fresh start. If you refuse, you get nothing, and the sheriff will remove you. Mark $5,000. It was enough to pay a deposit on a cheap apartment. It was enough to fix my car. For a second. Just a split second. I considered it. I was so tired. I was so tired of fighting a man who held all the power. Then I looked at the photo of the empty jewelry box. I looked at the blurry screenshot of the eviction notice. He wasn't offering me money because he was generous. He was offering me money because I was the only loose thread in his perfect tapestry of fraud. If I signed that document, I would be validating his theft. I would be signing away my mother's house, her legacy, and the truth. I called Holloway's office. I got his voicemail. Mr. Holloway, it's Sarah. I found the title company, First American. The closer is Linda Vance. Also, Mark just offered me $5,000 to leave by Thursday. I waited for a callback, but I knew what he would say. Don't take the bait. Accepting the money would be an admission that I was just a tenant. It would be a settlement. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop. I wasn't going to just decline. I was going to start the paper trail Holloway talked about. I typed a reply. Mark, I am in receipt of your offer. I decline. As you know, I am an heir to the estate of Mary Reed. The validity of the sale of the property at 412 Oak Street is currently under review by my legal counsel. There is no open probate case in the county court, and therefore no authorized personal representative to conduct this sale. I will not be vacating the property. I will not be signing any waivers. Any attempt to remove me or my belongings without a valid court order signed by a judge will be treated as an illegal eviction and reported to the authorities. Please direct all further communication to my attorney, Elias Holloway. Sarah Reed. I hit send. The room felt quieter after that. The air felt charged. I had just declared war. I spent the rest of the night building the binder. I took the 3-ring binder from my college days, the one I had used for chemistry. I ripped out the old notes. Tab 1. Proof of residence. I 3-hole punched my driver's license copy, the utility bills I had paid for the last 3 months, and the bank statements showing the transfers. Tab 2. The estate documents. I inserted the death certificate, the blurry screenshots Mark sent me, the copy of the quitclaim deed from the recorder's office with the Nevada notary stamp. Tab 3. The discrepancies. I printed out the Secretary of State filing for Obsidian Holdings, LLC. I printed the timeline I had written, detailing every conversation, every threat. Tab 4. The will. I put the manila envelope I found in the cookbooks into a plastic sleeve, the life insurance summary, the mortgage statement, and the handwritten note. I need to protect Sarah. It wasn't a formal will. Holloway had warned me it might not hold up in court as a testamentary document, but it was evidence of intent. It was evidence that Mark was lying when he said Mom left everything to him. I worked until midnight. My eyes burned. My back ached. At 12:30, I heard a car drive slowly past the house. I froze. I went to the window and peeked through the blinds. It was Mark's sedan. He slowed down, stopped in front of the driveway, and just sat there. He didn't come to the door. He didn't honk. He just sat there, bathing the front of the house in his headlights. It was a reminder. I am watching you. I stood my ground, watching him back. I touched the binder sitting on the table. I am watching you too. Mark. After a long minute, he drove away. I didn't sleep in my bed. I slept on the couch again, with the binder on the coffee table and the chair wedged under the door handle. Tomorrow, I had to draft the letter to the title company. Tomorrow, I had to stop a freight train with a piece of paper. But tonight, I was still here. I was still in my mother's house, and for the first time since she died. I felt like I was actually doing what she asked. I was protecting it. The courthouse basement was becoming my second home, a place of fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial floor wax. I stood at the counter of the probate division, my hands pressed flat against the cool marble, waiting for the clerk to run the search again. I had been there for 20 minutes. The clerk, a woman named Patricia, who wore a sweater despite the stifling July heat, was frowning at her monitor. "Are you sure about the spelling?" she asked, tapping a manicured fingernail on the enter key. "Halstead? Reed? Positive." I said, "Mary Reed. Date of death, April 14th of this year." Patricia shook her head and swiveled the screen toward me. It was blank. "There is nothing." "Sarah," she said, her voice softening with pity. "No petition for probate, no application for letters testamentary, no small estate affidavit. There is absolutely no case open for your mother in this county." I stared at the empty white box on the screen. It was what I had suspected. But seeing it confirmed gave me a strange, vertiginous feeling, like stepping off a curb that wasn't there. Mark had shown me an eviction notice. He had signed a deed as the personal representative of the estate. He was selling the house in 3 days, and yet, in the eyes of the law, he was nobody. He hadn't even started the process. "So he has no authority?" I asked, needing to hear it aloud. "He can't legally sign a deed?" Patricia pulled the screen back. "Honey, until a judge signs off and issues those letters, nobody can sign anything for the deceased. If he is out there signing deeds as an executor, he is making a very big mistake." It wasn't a mistake, it was a gamble. Mark was betting that the speed of the sale would outrun the slowness of the bureaucracy. He was betting that the title company would see personal representative on a document and assume the court order was attached, or that he had forged a court order so good that no one would check the docket number until the money was already wired to the Cayman Islands. I thanked Patricia and walked out into the blinding afternoon sun. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Holloway's office. "Come in." The receptionist said, "He has the draft ready." I drove straight to the law office. The binder I had built the night before sat on the passenger seat, a heavy, accusatory brick. Holloway was standing by the window when I entered, looking out at the traffic. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We are going to stop this," he said, turning to face me. "But we have to be loud." He slid a document across the mahogany desk. It was on thick, cream-colored paper with his firm's letterhead at the top. The bold text in the center read, "Notice of disputed title and demand to cease transaction." "Read it," he said. I picked it up. The language was sharp, aggressive, and devoid of emotion. 2. First American Title Insurance Company. Attention. Linda Vance, escrow officer regarding escrow. Number, pending, 412 Go. Oak Street, please be advised that this firm represents Sarah Reed, legal heir and occupant of the subject property. We have evidence that the purported seller, Mark Halstead, lacks the requisite testamentary authority to convey title. A search of the county probate records confirms that no estate has been opened, and no letters testamentary have been issued. Any deed executed by Mr. Halstead as personal representative is void ab initio. Proceeding with this closing with knowledge of this defect will expose your company and the buyer to significant liability for fraud and wrongful transfer. We demand that you immediately suspend all closing activities and freeze any funds currently held in escrow, pending a judicial determination of ownership. I looked up at Holloway. It sounds like a threat. It is a promise. Holloway corrected. Title companies are risk-averse creatures. Sarah, they collect premiums to insure against exactly this kind of mess. If they know there is a potential lawsuit attached to the property, they won't issue the policy. And without a title policy, no bank will lend, and no smart buyer will close. He handed me a pen. Sign the attached affidavit. It states under penalty of perjury that you are the daughter, that you live there, and that you contest the will. I signed it. The scratch of the pen sounded loud in the quiet office. "I will have a courier run this over to First American within the hour," Holloway said. "He will hand-deliver it to Linda Vance. We want a signature of receipt. What happens then?" I asked. "Then we wait." Holloway said, "And you keep digging. If Mark is bold enough to fake a probate status, he has probably left other cracks in the foundation. Find them." I left Holloway's office with a copy of the letter in my bag. I felt a grim sense of purpose. I had fired a shot across the bow. Now I needed to reload. My next stop was the bank. Mom had banked at First National for 30 years. It was a small branch with dark wood paneling and tellers who gave lollipops to kids. I hadn't been there in years, not since I opened my own student checking account before college. I walked in and asked to speak to a personal banker, a woman named Mrs. Higgins led me to a cubicle. She had kindly eyes and a framed photo of a golden retriever on her desk. "How can I help you?" "Ms. Reed?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "My mother, Mary Reed, passed away in April, Mrs." Higgins' face fell. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Mary was a lovely woman. She always came in on Fridays." I nodded, fighting the lump in my throat. I am trying to sort through her finances. My stepfather. Things are disorganized. I need to know if I am listed as a beneficiary on any of her accounts. Mrs. Higgins tapped on her keyboard. "I need to see the death certificate and your ID." I handed them over. She scrutinized them, then typed some more. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the air conditioning and the distant murmur of the lobby. "I see her accounts," Mrs. Higgins said slowly. "It looks like the joint checking account with Mr. Halstead was closed 2 weeks ago." "Closed?" I asked. "Yes, the balance was withdrawn, and the account was shuttered." My stomach twisted. "Mark had cleaned it out." "Is that all?" I asked. Mrs. Higgins frowned. "Well, she had a safe deposit box, but that was closed out by Mr. Halstead the day after she died. And, hold on." She squinted at the screen. "There is another account here," she said. "It is a money market account. It is just in her name. The Mary Reed Freedom Fund." The name hit me like a physical blow. Freedom Fund. Mom had always talked about wanting to travel, wanting to see Italy. I thought it was just a daydream. "Is Mark on that account?" I asked. "No," Mrs. Higgins said. "It is an individual account. And, oh, this is interesting. You are listed as the payable on death beneficiary." I felt tears prick my eyes. She had kept it separate. She had kept it for me. "How much is in it?" I asked. Mrs. Higgins clicked a few times. "It is empty." "Sarah." I froze. "Empty?" "The balance is 0, she said. "It looks like wait. It wasn't withdrawn. It was depleted over time." She turned the monitor so I could see. "Look at the transaction history," she said, pointing to a column of red numbers. "Every month, on the 1st, there is an automatic transfer, $2,400. Where did it go?" I asked. Mrs. Higgins clicked on the transfer code. "It went to Midland Mortgage Service." I stared at the screen. Midland Mortgage handled the loan on the house. Mark had told me, over and over, that he paid the mortgage. He used it as a weapon. "I pay the bills." "Sarah, I kept a roof over your head while your mother was sick." He was lying. Mom was paying the mortgage. She was paying it from a secret account he didn't have access to. She had set it up on autopay to bypass him entirely. "Why would she do that?" I asked, half to myself. Mrs. Higgins looked at me sadly. "People usually do that when they want to ensure a bill gets paid, no matter what happens to the joint funds. It looks like she wanted to make sure the house was safe. She didn't trust him." I realized. She knew he was reckless with money, or she knew he would prioritize his own debts over the house. She was protecting the asset from the grave. "Can you print this history?" I asked. "I can." Mrs. Higgins said, "Since you are the beneficiary, you have a right to the statements." She printed out 2 years of transaction logs. I held the warm paper in my hands. This proved Mark was a liar. It proved that his claim of supporting us was a fabrication. But more importantly, it proved that Mom considered the house hers to protect. I thanked Mrs. Higgins and walked out. The sun was lower now, casting long, distorted shadows across the parking lot. I sat in my car and looked at the statements. Midland Mortgage, Midland Mortgage, Midland Mortgage. Mom had been fighting for this house quietly, month after month. Now it was my turn. I drove back to the neighborhood but didn't pull into the driveway. I parked down the street again. I didn't want to run into Mark. I needed to talk to the neighbors. I saw Mr. Henderson watering his lawn 2 houses down. He was a retired engineer, a man who noticed everything and said very little. I walked over. Mr. Henderson. I said, Sarah. He said, nodding. He didn't smile. He looked concerned. I saw the police car yesterday. Is everything all right? Police car? I asked. Mark called them. He said, about a week ago. Said there were trespassers. They didn't stay long. I felt a chill. Mark was laying the groundwork. He was creating a record of trouble at the house. Mr. Henderson turned off the hose. You know, I saw something odd the other day. I wasn't going to mention it. But since you're here, what was it? I asked. It was the day after the funeral. He said, you were at the reception hall. I think Mark came back to the house. He wasn't alone. Who was he with? A man in a suit? Mr. Henderson said, slicked back hair, fancy car, not a local. They went inside for maybe 10 minutes. When they came out, Mark was carrying that blue accordion folder your mother used to keep in the study. The blue folder. That was the original file. The one with the deed, the birth certificates, the marriage license, and the will. Mark handed it to the guy. Mr. Henderson continued. The guy put it in a briefcase, shook Mark's hand, and drove off. It looked transactional. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mark hadn't just hidden the will. He had given it to someone, or sold it, or given it to a lawyer to destroy. Did you recognize the man? I asked. No, Mr. Henderson said. But he drove a black Lexus, had a vanity plate, something like LGL-EGL, Legal Eagle? I don't know. It seemed cheesy. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I said, that helps more than you know. I walked back to my car. The picture was getting clearer. Mark had cleansed the house of documents immediately. He had handed over the primary evidence to a third party. I looked at the estate/keep-safe file I had found in the cookbooks. It was a backup. Mom knew he might take the main file. She knew. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my notebook. I had one more lead to chase today. The notary, Jennifer S. Miller, the woman in Nevada who had stamped the quitclaim deed. I searched for her number again. It was a mobile notary service in Las Vegas. I dialed. It rang 4 times. Hello, this is Jennifer. A voice answered. She sounded rushed. Wind noise in the background like she was driving. Hi, Jennifer. I said, my name is Sarah Reed. I'm calling about a document you notarized recently, a quitclaim deed for a property in Ohio. Grantor was Mark Halstead. There was a pause. I do a lot of notarizations. Honey, I can't recall every single one. It was dated 3 days ago. I said, recorded yesterday. The signer was Mark Halstead, acting as personal representative. Oh, right, she said. The guy with the probate papers. What about it? I need to know something, I said, keeping my voice level. Did you see the court order appointing him as personal representative? Did you see the letters testamentary? She hesitated. Look, he uploaded his ID and the documents to the portal. It was a remote online notarization. He showed me the papers on the camera. He showed you the papers. I repeated. Did you verify them with the court? That is not my job. She snapped. My job is to verify identity. He sent me a PDF of a court order. It had a stamp. It looked real. I closed my eyes. It was a forgery. A PDF. He had cooked up in Photoshop. Did you ever speak to the owner of the property? I asked. Mary Reed? No, Jennifer said. He said she was deceased. That's why he was the representative. But the deed references a power of attorney in the recital. I lied, taking a wild guess based on the confusing clerk conversation from earlier. Wait, she said. Let me pull up the log. I heard her tapping on a phone screen. Okay, here it is. Yeah, he uploaded a power of attorney too. Said it gave him the right to act even before the probate was finished. Did you verify that power of attorney? I asked. Did you contact the principal, Mary Reed, to confirm she was competent when she signed it? She is dead. Lady, how am I supposed to contact her? But the power of attorney dies with the person. Jennifer, I said, my voice hardening, you can't use a POA after death, and you certainly can't use it to transfer real estate to yourself. Silence. Heavy, panicked silence. Who are you? She asked. I am the daughter, I said, and I am telling you that Mary Reed never signed that power of attorney, and Mark Halstead is not the personal representative. You notarized a fraudulent conveyance. Click. She hung up. I stared at the phone. She knew, or she suspected. She had been sloppy, accepting a PDF over a webcam without checking the public record, and now she was scared. I added it to my notes. Notary confirms Mark used a POA and a fake court order. It was enough. It was enough to bury him. I returned to the house as the sun began to set. The shadows in the living room were long and skeletal. I felt like an intruder in my own home. I went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. The tap sputtered. Then the lights went out. The refrigerator hum died. The microwave clock vanished. The house plunged into a sudden, thick gray silence. I stood there, gripping the glass. Had the storm knocked out the power? I looked out the window. The streetlights were on. Mr. Henderson's porch light was on. My phone buzzed. Mark? I slid the unlock bar and put it on speaker. Hello? Mark, I said. You think you're smart. Sarah? His voice was low, tight with rage. I didn't answer. I hit the record button on the screen. I got a call from First American. He said, they got a letter from some ambulance chaser lawyer. You are trying to sabotage the sale. I am trying to stop a theft, I said calmly. You are ruining everything, he shouted. Do you know what happens if this falls through? The buyers walk. The bank forecloses. You end up on the street with nothing. The mortgage is paid. Mark, I said, I saw the bank records. Mom paid it. There is no foreclosure risk. There was a stunned silence. He didn't know I knew. Listen to me, he hissed. I just cut the power. I canceled the account. The water is next. If you are not out by tomorrow morning, I am calling the police and reporting you for trespassing and elder abuse. Elder abuse? I asked, confused. Mom is dead. I'm the elder, he screamed. I am the widower. You are harassing me. I took a breath. Mark, I am a legal occupant of this home. I have established residency. Turning off the utilities is a constructive eviction. It is illegal. My lawyer is adding this call to the file. You little bitch, he spat. I hung up. I stood in the darkening kitchen, my heart pounding like a trapped bird. He was escalating. He was desperate. Cutting the power was a move of pure spite. I didn't panic. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. I went to the utility closet and found the stash of emergency candles Mom kept for tornado season. I lit 3 of them and placed them on the kitchen island. The soft, flickering light made the house feel holy, like a sanctuary. I wasn't leaving. I would sit in the dark if I had to. I sat down at the table with my laptop, tethering it to my phone's hotspot. I needed to check my email. I needed to see if Halloway had sent any updates. There was nothing from Halloway. But there was a notification in my personal inbox. Google Calendar, reminder. Closing, 412 Oak Street. I frowned. I hadn't set a reminder. I clicked on it. The invite had been sent from the halsteadsgmail.com. That was the joint email address Mom and Mark had shared for years. Mom used it for everything: recipes, family reunions, doctor appointments. Mark must have been using it to coordinate with the realtor, because it was the address on file for the house. He had created a calendar event for the closing. And because my email was still linked to the family group Mom had set up years ago, the invite had auto-populated to my calendar. He had forgotten I was in the group. He thought I was just a ghost in the system. I opened the event details. Event. Closing. 412 Oak Street sale. Date. Friday, July 24th. Time. 10 a.m. Location. First American Title. 2200 Parkway Boulevard. Conference Room B. Attendees: Mark Halstead, Brent Tucker, Realtor, Linda Vance, Escrow. I stared at the screen. Friday, 10 a.m., Conference Room B. I had the time. I had the place. I called Holloway immediately. He answered on the second ring. Sarah? He cut the power. I said, and he threatened to call the cops. Stay put, Holloway said firmly. If the cops come, show them your ID with the address. Show them the utility bills in the binder. They will call it a civil matter and leave. Do not let them intimidate you. I'm not leaving, I said. But listen, I know when the closing is. I told him about the calendar invite. Friday at 10? Holloway mused. That gives us 36 hours. Should I go? I asked. Holloway was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice dropping an octave. If you go, Sarah, you cannot scream. You cannot cry. You cannot throw water in his face. You have to be the sanest person in the room. I can do that. I said, you need to walk in there and put the fear of God into the escrow officer. Holloway said, not by being scary, but by being right. You are going to force them to look at the paperwork they are trying to ignore. I will be there, I said. Good, Holloway said. I will have the dispute letter officially recorded by then. When you walk into that room, you won't be empty-handed. You will be holding a grenade. I hung up. I looked around the candlelit kitchen. The shadows danced on the walls. The air was getting stuffy without the AC. But I didn't care. Mark thought he could starve me out. He thought he could scare me with darkness. But he forgot one thing. I grew up in this house. I knew where the candles were. I knew where the secrets were buried. And on Friday morning, I was going to introduce myself to the buyer. I blew out the candle nearest to me and watched the smoke curl up into the dark. See you on Friday. Mark. Friday morning arrived not with sunlight, but with a heavy, suffocating humidity that clung to the windows I had refused to open. The house was sweltering, without the air conditioning. The air inside had turned stagnant, smelling of old carpet and the faint, acrid scent of the emergency candles I had burned down to nubs the night before. I had been awake since 3 o'clock. I sat at the dining room table, the surface covered in paper. This was my war room. I wasn't just organizing documents. I was building a fortress. I picked up the binder. It was a standard black office binder, the kind kids use for high school history projects, but it felt heavier than lead. I checked the tabs for the 10th time. Tab A, the notice of dispute, the letter Holloway had drafted, signed, and notarized. It was the spear tip. Tab B, the probate search, a printout from the county clerk's website, time-stamped yesterday at 4 in the afternoon, showing the search results for Reed. Mary, the result? No records found. This was the shield. It proved Mark was a ghost in the system he claimed to control. Tab C, the discrepancies. This was the shrapnel. The screenshots of Mark's texts, where he claimed he had eviction authority without a case number. The photos of the cropped, blurry documents he had sent me. The affidavit from the Nevada notary stating she had never spoken to my mother. Tab D, proof of residence and intent. My utility bills. The bank statements showing Mom's secret mortgage payments. The handwritten note from the cookbook. I need to protect Sarah. I closed the binder. The snap of the rings was loud in the silent house. I went to the bathroom and showered in cold water. I didn't have hot water anyway. Mark had made sure of that. But the cold helped. It shocked my system into a state of hyper-alertness. I scrubbed my skin until it was pink, trying to wash off the feeling of being hunted. I dressed carefully. I put on a navy blue blazer I had bought for a job interview 3 years ago. It was slightly tight in the shoulders, but it looked authoritative. I wore slacks, not jeans. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun. I didn't wear makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I wanted them to see the exhaustion. I wanted them to see the toll. At 8 o'clock, a car door slammed outside. My stomach seized. I walked to the living room window and peered through the slat of the blinds. Mark was walking up the driveway. He wasn't wearing his usual casual dad attire of polo shirts and khakis. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit. It was tailored, sharp, and expensive. He wore a tie, a silk crimson thing that looked aggressive against his white shirt. He had a fresh haircut. He looked like a man who was going to accept an award. He looked like a man who had already won. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. I hadn't expected him to come here first. I thought he would go straight to the title company. The front door unlocked. He swung it open with a proprietary air, the keys jingling in his hand. He stopped when he saw me standing in the hallway. "Good morning, Sarah," he said. His voice was bright, forced, dripping with a toxic cheerfulness. "You are up early." I didn't answer. I just watched him. He stepped inside, wrinkling his nose at the stale, hot air. "God, it smells like a tomb in here," he said, shaking his head. "Well, no matter. The cleaners are coming tomorrow. They will air it out." He checked his watch, a heavy gold chronograph that caught the light. "I am just grabbing the garage remote and the spare set of keys from the drawer," he said, walking past me as if I were a piece of furniture. "Today is the big day. Finally getting this burden off our shoulders." He opened the kitchen drawer and rummaged around. "You know, Sarah," he said, raising his voice so I could hear him from the hallway. "I was thinking about you last night. I know you are angry. I know you think I am the villain. But one day, you will thank me. I am preventing this house from becoming a millstone around your neck. You can't afford the upkeep. You can't afford the taxes." He walked back into the hallway, holding the keys. He stopped in front of me, flashing a pitying smile. "I hope you have found a place to stay," he said, "because when I sign those papers at 10 o'clock, the new owners take possession. If you are still here at noon, the sheriff will be the one escorting you out, and I won't be able to stop them." He reached out and patted my shoulder. His hand felt heavy, hot. "Pack your bags. Kiddo, it is over." He turned and walked out the door, whistling softly. I watched him get into his silver sedan. I watched him check his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting his tie. He looked at the house one last time, a look of pure, unadulterated greed. And then he drove away. He didn't notice the binder on the table. He didn't notice that I was dressed for a meeting, not for moving. He thought I was defeated. He thought I was just standing in the wreckage, waiting for the end. I waited until his car turned the corner at the end of the block. Then I grabbed my purse and the binder. "I am not packing. Mark," I whispered to the empty house. "I am coming with you." I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store 2 miles from the title company. It was 9 o'clock. I had an hour. I needed one last piece of information. Holloway had told me that knowledge was leverage. I knew the buyer was Obsidian Holdings, LLC. But an LLC is just a mask. I needed to know who was wearing it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the title company's main line, not Linda Vance's direct line. She might recognize my voice or see my name on the caller ID if I had been flagged. I called the general reception. "First American Title. How can I help you?" A young woman answered. "Hi," I said, pitching my voice high and breathless, like a stressed intern. "This is Jessica from the buyer's side. I am calling about the Halstead closing at 10. "Oh, sure, Jessica," the receptionist said. "What do you need?" "My boss is freaking out." I said, "He thinks he wired the cash from the wrong account." "Can you just confirm the entity name on the file? Is it Obsidian Holdings or Obsidian Capital? He has two and he mixes them up constantly." The receptionist laughed. "Bosses, right? Hold on a sec. I heard clicking. It is Obsidian Holdings, LLC, she said. "Okay, great," I said. "And just to double check, that is the one funded by, Mr. Carter? Or was it Mr. Silva?" I threw out generic names, hoping she would correct me. She paused. "I don't see a Mr. Carter or Silva. The funds came in via wire yesterday from, let me see. It just says Private Client Services, Trust Account." "Oh, right, the trust," I said, thinking fast. "And the signatory coming in today? Is that the attorney?" "No." The receptionist said, "The signer for the LLC is listed as a Mr. Julian Vane." Julian Vane. The name hit me like a splash of ice water. Julian Vane. I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. I knew that name. 3 years ago, before Mom got sick, Mark had tried to start a consulting business. He had hosted a launch party at a steakhouse downtown. Mom had dragged me along. Mark had spent the whole night huddled in a booth with a man who wore too much cologne and talked about leveraging distressed assets. That man was Julian Vane. I remembered him because he had hit on me while I was waiting for the valet. He had slimy eyes and a laugh that sounded like a bark. Mark had introduced him as his financial wizard. The business had folded in 6 months. Mark had claimed they just went in different directions. But now, Julian Vane was the signatory for Obsidian Holdings, LLC. The buyer wasn't a stranger. The buyer wasn't a neutral third party. Mark was selling the house to his old partner. It was a wash sale, a sham. Mark was transferring the title to a company controlled by his friend, likely to strip the equity, launder the money, and cut me out completely. Then they would probably flip it in 6 months and split the profit. This wasn't just probate fraud. This was a conspiracy. My phone rang. It was Holloway. "I'm here," I said, answering immediately. "Are you calm?" Holloway asked. "I am angry." I said. "Angry is good," Holloway said, "but keep it cold. Listen, I have the courier receipt. The dispute letter was delivered to the front desk at First American 20 minutes ago. Did Linda Vance see it? We don't know." Holloway said, "Receptions can be black holes. It might be sitting in a mail cart. It might be on her desk under a stack of files. You cannot assume she has read it. You have to assume she thinks this is a standard deal. I found out who the buyer is." I said, "Julian Vane. He is an old business associate of Mark's." Holloway let out a low whistle. That changes things. That destroys their bona fide purchaser defense. If the buyer knows the seller and knows the potential defects, they are not protected. This is excellent, Sarah, but dangerous. Why dangerous? Because if they are colluding, they will push harder. Holloway warned, they are not just two parties trying to close a deal. They are accomplices trying to get away with a heist. If you interrupt them, they will try to bully you out of the room. They might call security. Let them. I said, "Sarah, listen to me," Holloway said, his voice dropping. "The law is on your side, but the room is on theirs. The realtor wants his commission. The title officer wants her fee. Mark wants the cash. You are the only person in that building who does not want this to happen. You have to be the wrench in the gears. Do not let them move you to a second location. Do not let them say, 'Let's talk in the hallway.' You stay at the table. I understand." I said, "Go get them," Holloway said. "And Sarah?" "Yeah? Don't let him see you sweat." I hung up. I looked at my reflection in the visor mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide. I looked terrified. I pinched my cheeks until they hurt, trying to bring some color back. I took a deep breath, holding it until my lungs burned. I put the car in drive. The First American Title Office was located in a glass and steel building in a corporate park. It looked sterile, imposing, and completely indifferent to human suffering. I parked my beat-up sedan between a white BMW and a black Range Rover. I felt small. I felt like a smudge on a pristine canvas. I checked the time. 9:45. I grabbed the binder. I stepped out into the heat, the asphalt radiating waves of shimmering distortion. I walked to the entrance but didn't go in. I stood near a pillar, shielded by a large potted plant, and watched the parking lot. At 9:50, a black Lexus pulled up. A man got out. He was tall, thin, wearing a suit that was too shiny. He had slicked back hair that was thinning on top. Julian Vane. He hadn't aged well in 3 years. He looked twitchy. He was carrying a briefcase. He checked his phone, typed a message, and walked toward the entrance. 2 minutes later, Mark's silver sedan arrived. Mark got out. Buttoning his jacket, he looked around the parking lot. Scanning for what? Me? No. He thought I was at home crying. He was scanning for witnesses. He was scanning for problems. He spotted Julian near the door. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He gave a quick, sharp nod. They didn't walk in together. Julian went first. Mark waited 30 seconds, then followed. They were pretending not to know each other. That was it. That was the final nail. I waited another minute. Then I saw a flashy convertible pull up. Prestige Realty was stenciled on the side door. A man hopped out. He was young, blonde, and radiated the frenetic energy of a golden retriever who drank too much espresso. Brent Tucker, the realtor. He was holding a bottle of champagne. Champagne. They were going to toast to stealing my mother's house. I felt the anger crystallize into something hard and sharp in my chest. It wasn't heat anymore. It was ice. I walked toward the doors. The lobby was cool and quiet. Soft jazz played from invisible speakers. A receptionist sat behind a high white desk. "Can I help you?" she asked. Looking at my intense expression and the heavy binder, "I am here for the Halstead closing." I said, 10 o'clock. She looked at a list. "Are you Sarah?" "I don't have a Sarah on the list. I have Mark Halstead and Julian Vane. I am an interested party." I said, "I am the heir." She hesitated. "Okay, they are in the conference room. Just down the hall. Second door on the left." I walked past her. My heels clicked loudly on the polished concrete floor. I reached the second door. It was glass, frosted in the middle for privacy. I could see silhouettes inside. I could hear laughter. I put my hand on the handle. Suddenly, the door opened. Brent Tucker, the realtor, stepped out. He was holding his phone, probably coming out to take a call. He stopped when he saw me. His smile vanished. "Can I help you?" he asked. He stood in the doorway, blocking my path. "I need to speak to the escrow officer." I said, "I am sorry. We are in the middle of a closing," Brent said, his voice taking on that condescending, gatekeeper tone. "Are you the assistant?" "I am Sarah Reed." I said, "Mark's stepdaughter." Brent's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Mark mentioned you. Look, Sarah, this is a private meeting. You can't be here. Mark said you were having a hard time with the transition, and I sympathize. Really. But this is a legal transaction. You need to wait in the lobby." He started to close the door. I jammed my foot in the gap. "I am not waiting in the lobby." I said loud enough for the room to hear. "I am here to dispute the authority of the seller." Brent flushed. He looked over his shoulder. "Sarah, please, don't cause a scene. Mark said you might get emotional." "I am not emotional," I said, pushing the door open with my shoulder. "I am litigious." I stepped around him and walked into the room. The conversation died instantly. It was a large room with a long oval table. Mark was sitting at the head, a pen in his hand, hovering over a stack of documents. Julian Vane was sitting opposite him, looking bored. A woman, Linda Vance, the escrow officer, was sitting in the middle, organizing a notary stamp and a stack of checks. Mark looked up. His smile froze. For a second, he looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Sarah?" he said. His voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" I walked to the empty chair at the foot of the table. I didn't sit down. I placed the black binder on the mahogany surface. It made a heavy, dull thud that echoed in the silence. "I am here to stop you from committing a felony." "Mark," I said. Mark stood up. His face went from shock to red-hot anger in a heartbeat. "Get out," he snapped. "Get her out of here. Brent, call security." "She is trespassing. She is unstable." "I am not unstable," I said. Turning to Linda Vance, the escrow officer looked alarmed. She was clutching her stamp like it was a pearl necklace. "Ms. Vance," I said, "my name is Sarah Reed. I am the daughter of Mary Reed, the owner of the property at 412 Oak Street." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "She is not the owner. I am the owner. I have the deed." I ignored him. I kept my eyes locked on Linda Vance. "Did you receive the cease and desist letter from the law firm of Halloway Associates this morning?" I asked. Linda blinked. "I haven't checked the mail yet." "Then I will provide you with a copy," I said. I opened the binder to tab A. I slid the letter across the table. "This notice informs you that there is an active dispute regarding the title of this property." I said, "Mark Halstead is attempting to sell this home as the personal representative of my mother's estate." "So what?" Mark shouted. "I am the personal representative. I have the paperwork." I turned to Mark. I looked him dead in the eye. "Then show it," I said. The room went dead silent. "Show us the letters testamentary." "Mark," I said, my voice steady, projecting to the back of the room. Show us the court order signed by a probate judge in this county appointing you as the executor. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the stack of papers in front of him. He looked at Julian. Julian was staring at the ceiling, suddenly very interested in the acoustic tiles. "It is in the file," Mark muttered. "I sent it to the notary." I turned back to Linda. "Ms. Vance, have you seen a certified copy of the court appointment? Not a PDF, not a photocopy, the original, court-embossed, letters testamentary?" Linda looked at her file. She flipped through the pages. Her hands were starting to shake. "I have a copy of a quitclaim deed recorded yesterday," she said softly, "and I have a copy of a general power of attorney." "A power of attorney expires at death," I said. "You know that. And a quitclaim deed signed by a personal representative is invalid without the court order attached to the chain of title." I pointed to the binder. "I checked the county docket yesterday." I said, "There is no probate case open for Mary Reed. There is no judge. There is no appointment. Mark Halstead has no legal authority to sign that deed." Linda Vance stopped moving. She took her hand off the notary stamp. She pushed her chair back a few inches, creating distance between herself and the documents. "This is ridiculous," Mark sputtered. He was sweating now. I could see the sheen on his forehead. "I have the papers at home. I forgot to bring the originals." "You forgot the court order?" I asked. "You brought your tie? You brought your friend Julian. But you forgot the one document that makes this legal?" Julian Vane sat up. "Hey, leave me out of this. I'm just the buyer. I'm a bona fide purchaser. Are you?" I asked. I turned to him. "Or are you Mark's former business partner from the failed consulting firm 3 years ago? And is Obsidian Holdings, LLC, just a shell to wash the title so you can split the equity?" Julian's face went pale. He looked at Mark with pure venom. "You said she was crazy." "Mark, you didn't say she was a detective." "Gentlemen," Linda Vance said. Her voice was sharp now, professional. She stood up. She gathered the stack of documents in front of Mark. She pulled them away from him. "We cannot proceed with this closing," she said. "What?" Mark screamed. He looked like he was going to lunge across the table. "You can't do this. We have a contract. The money is wired." "The money is frozen," Linda said, her voice icy. "First American cannot insure a title with an active dispute and allegations of fraud. Until I see a certified court order appointing you as personal representative, this file is on hold." "No," Mark yelled. He looked frantic. He looked like a trapped animal. "I need this to close today. You don't understand." "Why, Mark?" I asked quietly. "Why today?" He spun on me. His eyes were wild. The mask was gone. The grieving widower, the patient stepfather, the successful businessman, they had all melted away. All that was left was a desperate, broke man who had gambled everything on a lie. "You ruined it," he hissed at me. "You ungrateful little brat. You ruined everything." He took a step toward me, his fists clenched. Brent Tucker stepped in between us. "Mark, hey, calm down. Don't touch me," Mark shouted, shoving the realtor aside. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, my hand resting on the binder. "I suggest you call a lawyer." "Mark," I said, because I already did. Linda Vance picked up the phone on the wall. "I am calling my manager, and I am calling legal. No one leaves this room until we figure out what is going on with these funds." Mark looked at the phone. He looked at the documents he couldn't sign. He looked at Julian, who was hurriedly packing his briefcase, and then, for the first time, I saw it. Panic, real, visceral, suffocating panic. He realized he hadn't just lost the house. He had walked into a trap, and the door had just clicked shut behind him. The air in the conference room was so thick with tension it felt hard to breathe, like the oxygen had been sucked out by the vents. Linda Vance, the escrow officer, sat with her hand hovering over the telephone receiver she had just replaced. She looked pale. Mark remained standing, his hands planted flat on the mahogany table. He was leaning forward, trying to use his height, his suit, and his sheer volume to intimidate the room back into alignment. "This is a misunderstanding," Mark said. his voice booming with a forced, brittle confidence. He swept a hand toward the stack of papers in front of him. I have provided everything required. The deed is signed. The buyer is present with funds. This delay is costing everyone money. Linda looked at him over the rim of her glasses. Mr. Halstead, it is not a misunderstanding. It is a compliance failure. We cannot close on a property when the ownership is being actively contested by a legal heir. It is not contested, Mark shouted, a vein throbbing in his temple. She is not an heir. She is a stepdaughter with a grudge. I have the will right here. He grabbed a document from his pile and thrust it toward Linda. It was a photocopy. I could see it from where I stood. The edges were slightly crooked, and the toner was fading on the bottom half. Linda didn't take it. Mr. Halstead, I need the original. I need the wet ink document with the court seal. I told you, Mark snapped. Pulling the paper back, the court has it. This is the certified copy they sent me. I stepped forward. May I see that? I asked. No, Mark barked, clutching the paper to his chest. Linda, I said, keeping my voice level, look at the header on that document. Does it have the county clerk's embossed stamp? Or does it look like it was printed from a scan? Linda narrowed her eyes at Mark. Mr. Halstead, please place the document on the table. Reluctantly, Mark slapped the paper down. Linda leaned in. She adjusted her glasses. She touched the paper. It was smooth. There was no raised seal. There was no colored stamp. This is a photocopy, she said quietly. And look at the date, I added. Linda looked closer. The date at the top says January, she said, frowning. Your wife died in April. Mark froze. He had printed an old draft, or a fake one, and in his haste, he hadn't checked the timestamps. It is a typo, Mark said quickly. Too quickly. The court made a mistake. I can get it fixed. It is just a clerical error. Standard stuff. It is not standard, Linda said, pushing the paper away as if it were contaminated. Julian Vane, the buyer, cleared his throat. He sounded bored, but his foot was tapping a nervous rhythm against the table leg. Look, he said, smoothing his silk tie, I don't care about your family drama. I have $200,000 sitting in your escrow account. If we don't close by noon, I am in breach of my own financing terms. This woman, he pointed a manicured finger at me, is engaging in tortious interference with a business contract. He turned his cold, lizard-like gaze on me. You realize you are liable for damages, right? Julian said smoothly. If this deal falls through, I will sue you for the lost opportunity cost, and I will win. You are playing with big boys now, sweetheart. It was a good performance. It was meant to make me feel small, to make me worry about my bank account, to make me apologize and run away. But I wasn't thinking about my bank account. I was thinking about the empty jewelry box. I am not afraid of you, Mr. Vane, I said. And I think a judge will be very interested to hear why you are buying a house from your former business partner using a shell company formed 2 weeks ago. Julian's eyes narrowed. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened. The door opened. A woman walked in. She was older than Linda, wearing a sharp gray blazer and an expression that could curdle milk. She held a file folder under her arm. I am Margaret Sterling, the branch manager. She announced. Her voice was clipped and efficient. Linda, I have the update from the title plant. She didn't look at Mark or Julian. She walked straight to Linda and placed the file on the table. We have a problem, Mrs. Sterling said. Another one? Mark threw his hands up. This is incompetence. I am going to take my business to Stewart Title. You are free to do that. Mr. Halstead, Mrs. Sterling said coolly. But the lien follows the name, not the title company. Lien? Mark's face went slack. What lien? Mrs. Sterling opened the folder. We ran a final date-down search this morning, which is standard procedure before recording a deed. A judgment was filed against you personally in the county court 3 days ago. She pulled out a sheet of paper. Creditor, Venetian Palazzo Casino Resort. She read, amount, $42,000. The room went dead silent. I stared at Mark. $42,000. A gambling debt. That explains the rush. I thought, that explains the cash for keys offer. He wasn't just greedy, he was underwater. He needed the house sale proceeds to pay off the casino before they started garnishing his wages or seizing his own assets. That is a mistake. Mark stammered. His face was a sickly shade of gray. I settled that. It is an old account. It is a recorded judgment. Mrs. Sterling said, and because you transferred the property from the estate to yourself via that quitclaim deed yesterday, this lien has now attached to the property. She looked at Julian. Mr. Vane, we cannot issue clear title to your LLC. If you buy this house today, you buy the gambling debt with it. The lien stays on the house. Julian stood up so fast his chair tipped over. Are you kidding me? He shouted at Mark. You told me you were clean. You told me the title was unencumbered. I didn't know, Mark yelled back, his voice rising to a shriek. They promised they wouldn't file if I paid by the end of the month. That's why I need the closing today. He stopped. He clamped his mouth shut. He had just admitted it. He had just admitted that the sale was driven by his personal debt deadline, not the estate's interest. I looked at Linda Vance. She was typing furiously into her computer log. She was documenting the admission. Mark turned to me. His eyes were red, frantic. This is your fault, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my face. You dragged this out. If you had just moved out last week, I could have closed before the judgment hit. You ruined everything. I stood very still. I didn't step back. You ruined yourself. Mark, I said softly. Brent Tucker, the realtor, looked desperate. He saw his commission evaporating. He stepped forward, putting on his best problem-solver smile. Okay, everyone, let's take a breath, Brent said. Mrs. Sterling, can't we just do a holdback? We keep the $42,000 in escrow to pay the lien and release the rest to Mark? We can surely indemnity the buyer, right? Mrs. Sterling shook her head. Her expression was final. Under normal circumstances, perhaps, she said, but we have a fundamental issue of authority. We have a quitclaim deed signed by a personal representative with no proof of appointment, and now we have a judgment lien complicating the transfer. She closed the file. First American is declining to insure this transaction. We are resigning as the escrow agent. No, Mark slammed his fist on the table. It made the water pitcher jump. You can't do that. I demand to speak to your legal department. I can help with that. I said. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Holloway. I put it on speaker and set it on the table next to the binder. He answered on the first ring. Holloway speaking. Mr. Holloway, I said. I am in the closing room at First American. I have Mrs. Sterling, the branch manager, and Linda Vance, the escrow officer. Mark Halstead and the buyer are also present. Who is this? Mark demanded. This is Elias Holloway, attorney for the estate of Mary Reed. Holloway's voice boomed from the tiny speaker. It was deep, gravelly, and commanded instant attention. I am formally requesting that this file be escalated to your fraud unit, Holloway said. We have evidence of a fraudulent conveyance, forgery of court documents, and now, self-dealing. Mrs. Sterling leaned toward the phone. Mr. Holloway, this is Margaret Sterling. We have already stopped the closing. We are returning the wire to the buyer. Good, Holloway said. Please ensure that all documents submitted by Mr. Halstead are preserved. We will be subpoenaing them. Wait a minute, Mark sputtered. He was sweating profusely now, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. You can't subpoena me. I am the executor. I have the will. Mr. Halstead, Holloway said. His voice was dangerously calm. Answer one question for the record. Where exactly is the original will? The one you claim gives you this authority? Mark looked at the phone. He looked at me. He looked at the door. I found it, he said. I found it in Mary's desk, in the blue folder. He answered too fast. I found it in the blue folder. Holloway repeated slowly. And you have it in your possession? Yes, Mark said. Of course I do. I looked at the table. I looked at the empty space where Mark's credibility used to be. Mr. Henderson, the neighbor, had told me Mark gave the blue folder to a man in a black Lexus the day after the funeral. "We will expect you to produce that original in probate court on Monday." Holloway said, "If you cannot, or if it has been altered, you will be facing charges for evidence tampering in addition to fraud." Mark didn't answer. He looked like he was going to be sick. Julian Vane grabbed his briefcase. "I am out," Julian said. He looked at Mark with disgust. "Don't call me. Don't text me. If I lose a dime on the wire transfer fees, I am sending my guys to your condo." He stormed out of the room. The door swinging shut behind him, the room felt suddenly large and cold. Brent Tucker was packing up his glossy folders, looking defeated. He wouldn't look at Mark. Mrs. Sterling picked up the file. "Mr. Halstead," she said, "we are done here. Please remove your documents from the table." Mark stood there for a long moment. He looked at the pile of photocopies. He looked at the rejection. He looked at me. There was no anger left in his eyes, just a hollow, terrifying emptiness. He looked like a man who realized the ground had opened up beneath him. "You think you won," he whispered. I didn't answer. He grabbed his papers, crumpling them into a messy ball, and shoved them into his pockets. He turned and walked out. He didn't slam the door. He just left it open. I stood there, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. I looked at Linda Vance. She was slumped in her chair, rubbing her temples. "I am sorry," she said to me. "I didn't know. It is okay." I said. My voice was shaking now. The adrenaline was crashing. "I need to sit down." Mrs. Sterling pulled out a chair for me. "Sit," she said kindly. "You did a brave thing, coming here." I sat. I put my head in my hands. I had stopped the sale. Mark didn't get the money. Julian Vane was gone. The house was safe for today. But as I sat in the fluorescent light of the closing room, hearing the distant hum of the office printers, I realized something. Mark was cornered. He owed $42,000 to a casino. He had committed fraud. He had lost his buyer. He wasn't just a greedy stepfather anymore. He was a desperate man with nothing left to lose. I had stopped the sale, but I had started something much more dangerous. Holloway was still on the speakerphone. "Sarah?" he asked gently. "Are they gone?" "They are gone," I whispered. "Go home," Holloway said. "Lock the doors. And Sarah?" "Yeah? Do not go there alone." The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a decompression chamber. My ears popped. Or maybe that was just the pressure in my skull finally releasing. I stepped out of the First American building into the blinding white heat of the parking lot, clutching my binder to my chest. The asphalt radiated a shimmering haze. Distorting the cars in the distance, I walked toward my sedan, my legs feeling heavy and rubbery. I fished my keys out of my purse, my fingers brushing against the cool metal of the pepper spray I had started carrying 3 days ago. I reached my car and unlocked the door. "You think you are clever, don't you?" The voice came from behind me, low and wet with rage. I spun around. Mark was leaning against the white BMW parked next to me. He had taken off his jacket. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, sticking to his chest in dark. Translucent patches. His tie was loosened, hanging askew like a noose. I didn't step back. I hit the record button on my phone, which was already in my hand. "I think I'm finished." "Mark," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady. It didn't pitch up into fear. It sat low in my throat, grounded. He laughed, a dry hacking sound. "Finished? You have no idea what you have done. You didn't just stop a sale. Sarah, you humiliated me. You humiliated Julian. Do you know who Julian is? Do you know who he knows? He is a con artist." I said, "Just like you." He pushed off the car and took a step toward me. He was close enough that I could smell him. Acrid sweat, expensive cologne, and the stale scent of fear. "You have made an enemy today," he hissed. "You think this is over because some escrow lady got cold feet? I will drain you. I will tie this estate up in court for 10 years. You will bleed legal fees until you are living in a cardboard box. And that house? I will burn it down before I let you keep it. I held the phone up, making sure the camera lens was pointed squarely at his face. Say that again. I said, tell the judge how you plan to commit arson. Mark looked at the phone. His eyes bulged. For a second, I thought he was going to slap it out of my hand. His arm twitched, but he didn't. He was a coward. He was a man who worked in the shadows, with paper and lies. He withered under direct light. You will regret this. He spat. Watch your back. Sarah. He turned and marched to his car. He got in, slammed the door so hard the chassis shook, and peeled out of the lot, his tires screaming against the hot pavement. I stood there until his taillights disappeared onto the main road. Only then did I let myself breathe. I got into my car and locked the doors. I sat there for 5 minutes, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't put the key in the ignition. He was going to burn it down. He didn't mean it literally, or maybe he did, but the message was clear. If he couldn't have the asset, he would destroy its value. I drove home, constantly checking my rearview mirror. The call from Holloway came 2 hours later. I was sitting on the floor of my living room, staring at the empty space on the wall where the family photos used to hang. Sarah, Holloway said. His voice sounded different, lighter, excited. Did he file something else? I asked, bracing myself. No, Holloway said. I went digging. After the closing blew up, I had my paralegal run a deep search on the grantor index. Not just for the last year, but going back a decade. I wanted to see if Mark had ever been on the title before, and he wasn't, Holloway said. But I found something else. I found a document your mother recorded 4 years ago. It was misindexed by the clerk under Reed instead of Reed, which is why it didn't show up in the standard search. What is it? I asked. It is a transfer on death affidavit, Holloway said. I frowned. What does that mean? It means your mother was smarter than all of us, Holloway said. In Ohio, you can record an affidavit that designates a beneficiary for your real estate upon your death. It bypasses probate entirely. It bypasses the will. It bypasses the spouse. My heart stopped. Who is the beneficiary? I whispered, though I already knew. You are, Holloway said. Sarah Reed, the moment your mother died on April 14th, the house became yours, automatically, by operation of law. I let out a sob. It was a short, sharp sound that hurt my chest. She knew, I said. She knew he would try to take it. She did. Holloway confirmed, and here's the kicker. Sarah, Mark's filings, the quitclaim deed he signed as personal representative, they are not just fraudulent, they are legal nonsense. The estate never owned the house. The estate had nothing to sell. He was trying to sell a house that had already belonged to you for 3 months. So I own it? I asked. I really own it? You own it, Holloway said. I am filing the confirmation of transfer today. It will update the auditor's website. You are not a tenant. Sarah, you are the landlord. I hung up the phone and looked around the room. The shadows didn't look so menacing anymore. The house wasn't a battlefield. It was mine. The tide turned fast after that. It was like watching a dam break. At 4 o'clock, an email arrived from the legal department of First American Title. It wasn't addressed to occupant. It was addressed to Ms. Sarah Reed, owner. Dear Ms. Reed, regarding the escrow file for 412 Oak Street, our fraud investigation unit has flagged the attempted transaction in light of the irregularities discovered at closing. We are requesting your cooperation. Please provide a sworn affidavit detailing your knowledge of the decedent's estate plan. We are also preserving all communication from Mr. Halstead as potential evidence of wire fraud. I read it twice. For weeks, I had been the nuisance, the stepkid, the squatter. Now, I was the witness. I was the serious party. I forwarded the email to Holloway. Then came the second blow to Mark's house of cards. Holloway forwarded me a document at 5 o'clock. Subject: Notary affidavit. Sarah, look at this. The notary in Nevada got scared. I opened the attachment. It was a sworn statement from Jennifer S. Miller, the Las Vegas notary. I, Jennifer S. Miller, do hereby state that on July 20th, I performed a remote online notarization for a man identifying himself as Mark Halstead. At no time did I communicate with a Mary Reed. Mr. Halstead represented to me that he had a court order allowing him to sign on her behalf. He provided a PDF of a document that appeared to be a court order. He told me that if I did not notarize it immediately, he would report me to the Secretary of State for obstructing a legal process. I felt threatened and proceeded with the acknowledgement. She had rolled on him. She admitted he coerced her. She admitted the court order was a PDF, likely a Photoshop job. This was it. This was the proof of intent. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a calculated, pressured campaign to forge a deed. I felt a grim satisfaction. Mark had tried to bully everyone. Me, the realtor, the notary, but bullying only works until someone writes it down. I didn't stay at the house that evening. I went to the hardware store. I bought 3 new deadbolts. I bought heavy-duty strike plates with 3-inch screws. I bought 2 wireless cameras that connected to the cloud. When I got back to the house, the sun was setting. The street was quiet. I walked up the driveway and unlocked the front door. I stopped. The air inside felt different, disturbed. I had left the hallway rug perfectly straight. Now, it was kicked up at the corner. I dropped my bags and ran to the study. The door was open. The desk drawers were pulled out, hanging precariously from their tracks. Papers were scattered across the floor. Old receipts, greeting cards, instruction manuals. The file box, the one Mark had already rifled through weeks ago, was upside down. The lid had been forced open. The lock twisted and broken. He had been here, while I was at the hardware store, while I was buying locks to keep him out. He had used his key one last time. I scanned the room. What was he looking for? He knew the sale was dead. He knew the title company had flagged him. Why come back? Then I realized. He wasn't looking for money. He was looking for the evidence. He was looking for the keep safe envelope. He was looking for the original will. If it existed. He was looking for the transfer on death affidavit Halloway had found. Maybe he thought if he destroyed my copy, the county record would disappear too. I checked the kitchen. The cookbooks were still on the high shelf. I had moved the envelope to my car trunk 2 days ago. He hadn't found it. I checked the bedroom. My laptop was still there. He hadn't come to steal. He had come to purge. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. He had been here 20 minutes ago. The air still smelled faintly of his cologne. I didn't call the police. Not yet. They would take an hour to arrive. And they would call it a civil dispute because he still technically had a key. Instead, I got to work. I spent the next 3 hours changing every lock on the house. I drilled the 3-inch screws into the door frames, the wood groaning as I forced them in. I installed the cameras, one facing the driveway, one facing the front door. I packed up Mom's jewelry box, the empty one, and the few remaining photo albums. I put them in my car. I wasn't leaving anything irreplaceable in this house tonight. My grief, which had been a heavy, wet blanket for months, was changing. It was drying out. It was becoming something hard and sharp. A survival instinct. I ordered a pizza, but I couldn't eat it. I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the camera feed on my phone. At 9 o'clock, a car drove by slowly. It wasn't Mark's sedan. It was a dark SUV. It slowed down, paused in front of the house, and then sped up. Obsidian Holdings? Julian Vane's goons? Or just a lost delivery driver? I didn't know, but I slept with the hammer from my toolbox on the coffee table. Saturday morning brought a courier. I watched him on the camera as he walked up the path. He wasn't Mark. He was a kid in a polo shirt holding a large envelope. I opened the door. "Sarah Reed?" he asked. "Yes. Delivery for you?" He handed me the envelope and left. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. Baker Sneed, attorneys at law. I tore it open. Notice of demand for payment and damages. Dear Ms. Reed, this firm represents Mark Halstead. Please be advised that your continued unauthorized occupancy of the property at 412 Oak Street has caused our client significant financial harm. As the legal personal representative, Mr. Halstead is entitled to manage the estate assets. Your refusal to vacate resulted in the cancellation of a valid purchase agreement, causing a loss of $245,000 to the estate. Furthermore, inspection of the property reveals significant damage to the drywall and fixtures caused by your negligence. We hereby demand payment of 1. Occupancy use fees, $3,000 per month, April to July. 2. Tortious interference damages, $50,000. 3. Property restoration costs, $12,000. Total due, $74,000. Failure to remit payment within 30 days will result in a civil lawsuit against you. I stared at the letter. It was insane. It was gaslighting on an industrial scale. He was claiming I damaged the property. He was the one who ransacked the study. He was claiming occupancy fees for a house I owned. But it worked. It made my hands shake. It made me doubt, for just a second, if I was safe. He wasn't giving up. He knew he couldn't sell the house, so now he was trying to bury me in debt. He wanted to force me to sell the house just to pay his fake legal bills. I took a picture of the letter and sent it to Holloway. Add it to the pile. I texted. Holloway replied instantly, "Do not respond. This is a scare tactic. He is flailing. I am preparing the motion to dismiss and a counterclaim for frivolous litigation." I put the letter in the binder. Tab E. The harassment. Sunday was quiet. Too quiet. I spent the day cleaning the study. I put the drawers back on the tracks. I taped the broken file box back together. I tried to put Mom's life back in order. One piece of paper at a time, I found a receipt tucked into the back of the desk drawer. It was from a locksmith, dated 2 years ago. Rekey front door. Mom had changed the locks 2 years ago. Mark must have made a copy of the new key without her knowing. She had been living in a fortress of her own making, trying to keep him out even while they were married. I touched the paper. "I am sorry." "Mom," I whispered, "I should have seen it sooner." Monday morning was the day Holloway had promised the final blow. He was going to the courthouse to file the confirmation of transfer and formally record the transfer on death triggering event. I waited by the phone. At 10 o'clock, Holloway called. "Sarah," he said. I sat up straighter. "Is it done? Is the house in my name?" Holloway hesitated. There was a sound of shuffling papers in the background. "The transfer on death is recorded," he said. "The auditor now lists you as the sole owner. Mark is out." I let out a breath I had been holding for 3 days. Thank God. "But," Holloway said, and the word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "But what?" When I ran the final title update just now, something else popped up. What popped up? I stood up. "Holloway, what is it?" It was recorded Friday afternoon. Holloway said, at 4:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the recorder's office closed for the weekend, right after we stopped the closing at the title company. "What is it?" "It is a deed of trust." Holloway said, "A mortgage." "A mortgage?" I asked. "Who is the lender?" "Obsidian Holdings, LLC." Holloway said, My blood ran cold. Mark signed a promissory note to Julian Vane's company for $150,000. Holloway explained, his voice grim, and he secured it against the house. He must have signed it right after he left the closing room. He drove straight to the county recorder and filed it, before we could get the fraud alert on the docket. "But he can't do that," I shouted. "He doesn't own the house. The transfer on death deed means I own it. It is a mess." "Sarah," Holloway said, "legally, yes, the mortgage should be invalid because he didn't have the title to encumber, but it is recorded. It is a cloud on the title. Julian Vane now has a recorded lien on your house for $150,000. If we don't fight this, they will try to foreclose." I sank onto the floor. They didn't sell it. So they stole the equity instead. They encumbered it. Holloway corrected. "We can fight this. We will file a quiet title action. We will prove the mortgage is fraudulent because the grantor didn't own the property, but what? But it is going to take time," Holloway said, "and Julian Vane knows that." He is betting you will pay him a settlement just to make him go away. He is holding the house hostage. I looked at the camera feed on my phone. The front porch was empty. The new locks shone in the sunlight. The house was mine. But it was shackled. I hung up the phone. I looked at the binder. It was full. It was overflowing. I thought stopping the closing was the end. I thought winning the ownership was the victory. But as I looked at the letter from Mark demanding money, and thought about the lien Julian Vane had slapped on my home like a bumper sticker, I realized the truth. The closing wasn't the climax. It was just the opening shot. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. A silver sedan turned the corner, driving slowly. It didn't stop. It just cruised by. A shark patrolling the reef. I didn't hide. I stood in the window, watching him. I had the deed. I had the truth. I had the binder. You want a war. Mark? I whispered to the glass. You want to fight for every inch of this house? I went to the kitchen and grabbed a fresh notebook. I opened to the first page and wrote the date. Phase 2. I wasn't just Sarah the stepdaughter anymore. I was Sarah the owner, and I wasn't going anywhere. Thank you so much for listening to the story, Get Out, I Sold the House. It was an intense journey writing Sarah's battle for her mother's legacy, and I hope you felt every moment of the tension. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop your country or city in the comments below. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this revenge drama and want to see more stories where the underdog fights back with receipts and resilience, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. And finally, share your thoughts in English in the comments. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Do you think Mark and Julian will finally get what they deserve in court? Let's discuss it below. Stay safe and keep your receipts.